A real diplomatic and possibly military scandal is unfolding right now between Russia and Japan.
Vladimir Putin, for the first time in his 26 years in power, personally visited the Kuril Islands, the very ones because of which Moscow and Tokyo still haven't signed a peace treaty following World War II. And Japan's reaction was immediate. The country's Prime Minister Sanea Tokaiti called the visit, quote, hurtful to the Japanese people's feelings and absolutely unacceptable. But what's important is not only the fact of Japan's protest itself, but also the details of the current relations between the two countries. It's also important what exactly Vladimir Putin was doing in the Kurils, what he stated there, and how this is generally connected to the behavior of North Korea and China in this region. It turned out that all of this is interconnected. After all, Vladimir Putin, the day before, aboard the cruiser Varyak, spoke harshly about, as he says, Japan's unprovoked sanctions and mentioned Shinzo Abe. In addition, the visit happened the day after a missile launch by Russia's ally North Korea. In general, let's figure it out and put all these pieces together into a single picture. My name is Alexei Pichi. Let's figure out this topic together. But before we start, I'd ask you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Check right now if you are subscribed to this channel. Maybe you've been watching my episodes for a long time, but just forgot to click the subscribe button. It's very important, and I will be grateful to you for that. So, right now, check under this video if you are subscribed or not. So, let me remind you, on Thursday Vladimir Putin visited Iturup Island. This is the largest in the Kuril chain, which is controlled by Moscow, but also claimed by Tokyo. Vladimir Putin visited a fish processing plant, the local school in Kurilsk, and the hospital. He briefly spoke with local residents and met with the governor of the Sakhalin region, Valery Limarenko. By the way, excuse me for this lyrical digression. I often notice that there are a lot of people in power in Russia with Ukrainian last names. For example, Limarenko is a Ukrainian surname. You can tell by the ending, it's worth noting. But let's get back to the topic. The Kremlin published a video of Vladimir Putin's visit to Iturup, and Russian media reported that Putin was treated to red caviar at the factory. So basically, the picture that came out was that Vladimir Putin, look, is calmly talking with ordinary Russians and eating caviar together with those same Russians. But in reality, somewhere in the Kuril Islands. They took him far away so that, well, there definitely wouldn't be any assassination attempt. And before arriving at Iturup, Vladimir Putin visited Sakhalin, where he observed the final stage of the Pacific Fleet exercises. And he observed all of this aboard the cruiser Varyak. It was there, on the deck of the ship, that he made a statement which set the tone for the entire visit. Here is his quote. The current status of the Kuril Islands is enshrined in international documents as a reality that emerged as a result of World War II. But even here, Russia was ready to seek a solution with the aim of signing a peace treaty with Japan. Then Vladimir Putin specifically mentioned the late Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. According to him, Moscow, quote, developed constructive relations with a number of Japanese leaders, including the tragically deceased former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who did a lot to bring Japan and Russia closer together to coordinate our positions. Well, then Putin moves on to complaints and states that Japan imposed sanctions against Russia after Russia's barbaric occupation troops were sent to Ukraine in February 2022, and, quote, added Russia to the list of main sources of criminal activity. According to him, this marked a change in Japan's previously constructive approach. Separately, Vladimir Putin recalled the history of the issue. We all remember that Putin is apparently one hell of a historian. Well, Ukrainians laugh at him for constantly bringing up the Pechenegs and the Varangians. Well, he is completely unhinged. So in general, Putin noted that in the mid-1950s, the Soviet Union and Japan signed a declaration that paved the way to a peace treaty and, accordingly, to resolving the Kuril Islands dispute. Later, Japan withdrew from this declaration, said Putin, although Russia made concessions and resumed negotiations on a peace treaty. And in the end, his final quote was this: "Now, unfortunately, we are witnessing changes in positions that, I emphasize, were absolutely unprovoked on our part." Sorry, but what a complete idiot. So, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, well, is saying, let's put it this way, let's make it clear. Russia is occupying someone else's islands. The Kuril Islands have never belonged to the unwashed Russians. These are Japanese islands. Russia is occupying these islands, but calls Japan's claims unprovoked. Unprovoked. Well, what's going on in Putin's head, or does he just think everyone else in Russia are idiots? So, the Russian people are really so stupid that they don't understand basic things. So, the basic thing is this: the Kuril Islands are occupied by the Russian Federation. Putin says, there were no provocations from Japan, so why are they upset? Now, the reaction from the Japanese side, and it was sharp, but only at the diplomatic level. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan issued a statement saying that the country strongly protests against Putin's visit. Well, the Prime Minister of Japan, Tokaichi, made the following statement to journalists. Quote, "The Northern Territories are an integral part of Japan's territory, both historically and under international law. Vladimir Putin's visit hurts the feelings of the Japanese people and is absolutely unacceptable. It hinders the restoration of relations in the medium and long term. And so, the context of the dispute is important for understanding the overall scale of the conflict. 4 southern islands of the Kuril chain came under Moscow's control when Soviet troops occupied them at the end of World War II. Basically, they occupied these territories. Japan calls them the Northern Territories and considers them sovereign Japanese land. It is precisely this dispute that has prevented Moscow and Tokyo from officially signing a document ending their World War II era relations for decades. Relations between the two countries sharply deteriorated after Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Japan joined other G7 countries in imposing sanctions against Russia and also provides Kiev with money and non-lethal assistance. And back in February of this year, the Kremlin stated that there was no peace talks with Japan and described bilateral relations as practically reduced to zero because of what Moscow called Tokyo's unfriendly policy. In other words, thugs attack a neighboring country. The entire reasonable world says that you are stupid thugs, and these thugs say you are pursuing an unfriendly policy. And now here's a detail that adds an extra layer of subtext to Vladimir Putin's visit to the Kuril Islands. Putin visited Iturup the day after Russia's ally, North Korea, launched a missile. Pyongyang conducted its second ballistic missile test in less than a week on Wednesday. This was the 9th such test since the beginning of this year. The missile was launched from the Wonsan area on the east coast and it flew more than 700 kilometers. The South Korean military and the South Korean National Security Council called this an act of provocation and demanded that Pyongyang immediately stop such launches. According to South Korean and Japanese authorities, the missile launch was most likely a protest against the upcoming joint military exercises between South Korea and the US called Ulchi Freedom Shield, which are scheduled to begin on August 17. Pyongyang, let me remind you, has been responding to such maneuvers for years with its own show-of-force missile launches. Well, here I would say that Vladimir Putin is simply trying to coordinate his provocations with his allies' actions. Because now Japan has to be distracted by dealing with the Russians. Whose dictator showed up on the Japanese Kuril Islands? And this is also a way of testing the reaction, because Vladimir Putin, and I emphasize, not once during his entire time in power, has not visited these occupied Japanese islands. So if you put it all together, that's how it looks. Putin's first personal visit to the disputed islands in 26 years is not just a formal visit to a fish processing plant. This is a calculated political gesture on the eve of and during rising tensions with Tokyo. Putin publicly called the Japanese sanctions unprovoked and referred to his good memories of Abe, but immediately made it bluntly clear that the status of the islands for Moscow is determined by the outcome of the war and is not subject to discussion. Japan responded in the strongest diplomatic terms available, and what? As they said, this is a strong protest and words about insulting the feelings of the Japanese people. But you know, it's always very strange to watch how US allies in the Indo-Pacific region, they don't want to. They just don't want to take advantage of this historic moment of Russia's weakness and strike Russia themselves and take back what rightfully belongs to them. They see the weakness, but they continue to do nothing. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye everyone.